did he use the bathroom at lunch?
Yeah.
It's a good comment.
That was pretty funny.
Why? You eat during lunch?
You can do both. Some cultures they eat on the toilet.
Which one?
I don't know.
You guys should see dinner at my house.
So, this is the famous conformity experiment that they talked about in the video.
Good.
McLean, thank you. Which does the line match, A, B, or C?
A. I know.
What do you B.
So what this experiment does, and
it's lower.
Yeah, this isn't a very good example, is it?
Is it B?
It's supposed to be B. In the experiment, the sample is the same as B. And what they do is they get about 10 people, and 9 of them are in on the experiment with the scientist, and only 1 of them is actually the subject of the experiment. So I go around and I say, okay, which one does the line match? And you would say A. You'd say the wrong one. And you'd say A, and you'd say A, and you'd say A, and now and you're the one that's not in on it.
Nervous?
What are you going to say? 37% of trials, they would also say A, even if they knew it was B, because the power of the situation is that strong. You don't want to go against the group.
I do.
That's called the conformity experiment. And that's kind of a famous one.
Whoops.
And it kind of leads to the idea of behavior in groups is different than behavior alone. We get you all together in a big group, you're liable to do something totally different than if you were alone as an individual. And there's a phenomenon tied to this. It's called groupthink. In close-knit groups, the tendency for all members to think alike and suppress disagreement for the sake of harmony. You might come into a class and say, Mr. Willis, can you move the test to tomorrow? And I go, no, I can't move the test tomorrow. We're having a day. Mr. Willis, we got so much to do. Everybody wants you to move the test to tomorrow. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
And everybody says, yeah, and nods. And there may be someone who doesn't want the test moved tomorrow. There may be several. But they're not going to go against this group because that's an unpopular decision, and they know that they might have some problems later if they go against the group. So we call this tendency for everyone in the group to act the same to save group harmony, groupthink. That's called groupthink. Groups have an illusion of invincibility. You think you're invincible if everyone's doing it. Why can't you do it? You know, that's the first thing somebody says when they get caught doing something wrong. You know, your cop pulls you over for speeding. Well, everybody was speeding. I was just going along with everybody, right? Self-censorship. The group keeps others in the group from speaking up. That's self-censorship. The group keeps others in the group from going against the group. There's pressure on any dissenters to conform. Peer pressure. So it gives you an illusion of unanimity. That means like unanimous. The group is unanimous. When often it's not really unanimous. There's a few that don't want the test. And this leads us to something else called the anonymous crowd. There's been experiments to show that in crowds, a phenomenon occurs called diffusion of responsibility. And this is easy to see like in a riot. I remember in, I can't remember what year it was, but in California, the Rodney King, are y'all too young for that?
No.
Rodney King, do you remember that?
I do.
Some white police officers beat a black guy, you know, really badly, and it was all caught on tape. And they were just, he wouldn't do it, he was laying there, and one would beat him, and then another one would come beat him, and it was just highly illegal and bad, and the cops got in a lot of trouble. You'd think they'd go to prison, right? the jury let him off. And there was a big riot afterwards in
LA riot.
in California, the LA riots. And so there's a lot of violence. People were breaking windows, and during all this, people were grabbing, people would break store windows, and they'd go in there and grab TVs. And I remember seeing there was a camera following along one guy, and he had a TV, and he's running with them. And they're like, going, "Why are you stealing that TV?" And he's going, "You got to get what you can get, And everybody's just going crazy. And in that situation, there's a diffusion of responsibility. People think that since everybody's going crazy, they can go crazy and they won't get in trouble for it. And the problem is there were news people all over the place with cameras, and all these people that did all these crimes, they all got in trouble for it. And there was a backlog for years in court of getting all these people processed for stealing and breaking things and violence. There were people killed that day. They'd just stop a car and drag people out and kill them. And man, those people went to jail.
If you can't.
And you just, even though it's a big crowd, you still, the law applies for each individual. And surely there's plenty of people who got away with stuff that day and were never punished. But we call that a diffusion of responsibility. In a crowd, you feel like you aren't responsible for your actions as you would. And probably most of those people wouldn't have done anything like that if they weren't part of a crowd. De-individuation is another thing that's very similar. You don't feel like an individual when you're part of a group. You feel your sensibility about you as an individual kind of leaves you. And so these things are tied together. Diffusion of responsibility, de-individuation, they go together in the anonymous crowd. Here's a cool experiment related to this. You'll like this one. It's another 1970s video, but it's funny.
Why don't you tell us how you got interested in this kind of research?
We started out what a lot of people did, I guess, with the Kitty Genovese incident that happened in New York. You probably are familiar with it, but a young lady got stabbed to death by a random killer, and her neighbors watched while this went on. It went on for about 40 minutes, and nobody helped, and the police were not called until much, much later, and so finally she died. And the thing that was so shocking and so terrifying was she died while other people who could have helped, her neighbors, just watched and did nothing about it.
We decided to try to create a relatively ambiguous situation to which we could see how people responded. We thought that one kind of thing that comes up that's often hard to tell whether it's a real emergency or not has to do with fire. You're sitting in a room in a building, and you see vapor start coming through a vent in the door. Is that a fire, or is it an air conditioning system gone crazy, or something else? We're doing an experiment, and we'd like it if you could help act as the receptionist. The thing that's going to happen is that subjects will come in, and we'll arrange that they come to this door. They'll stop and say something on the order, "I'm here for the urban studies interview," and they'll ask where to go or what to do. If you could just tell them, direct them down the hall to the waiting room that we've set up for this, ask them to look at the blackboard, do the instructions like that, and that would run up. Please have it.
Sorry, I'm not sure why it's skipping.
What are they saying? I can't understand the words they're saying.
Okay, so what they're doing, they're setting up a situation. People are going to come to this room and say that they're involved in this study. And they're going to send them into the next room, and you'll see what happens. Maybe if I close some of these. This whole thing's like locking up on me.
Hi, I'm here for the urban here.
Go to the room at the end of the hall and read the instructions on the blackboard. yo will be with you in a few minutes.
It would be interesting to see if people would be less likely to make an emergency interpretation of an event if they're in the presence of other people than if they were alone. We had 24 people come in one at a time and be exposed to this situation alone. And the response was very characteristic, very typical.
There's smoke pouring out of one of the doors in that room in there.
Smoke?
That's right, a lot of smoke was pouring out.
One of the things that struck us in thinking about the Genovese case was that perhaps the mere presence of so many people, the fact that each person knows that other people are watching, the fact that in an ambiguous situation each person looks to each other to see what to do may have helped to inhibit response.
When you collected a group of 3 people together, the reactions to the smoke were quite different.
We thought that might be perhaps the key to at least one aspect of why people don't know. Because until somebody acts when there are several people present, what each person sees is other people who are doing nothing. And other people who are telling you that nothing is the right thing to do.
So they kill themselves.
So there's a lot of cases where there's danger and there's a lot of people around and nobody does anything because nobody wants to be the one to yell fire when maybe it was not any real problem. And so it often leads to inaction when there's a big group. And there are factors that will make you go against the group. And these are the factors. You perceive the need for intervention or help. Sometimes people don't perceive a problem, and everybody just kind of sits there and does nothing because they don't really think that there might be a problem. But if somebody does, it will help them go away from the group and take action. Sometimes the situation makes it likely that you will take responsibility. If you feel that it's going to come down on you if nothing happens, you'll take action in a situation where nobody's doing anything or no one's going against the group. Sometimes there's a cost-benefit ratio that supports your decision to get involved. Have you ever heard of a whistleblower?
Yes.
What's a whistleblower? Do you know?
Oh, me?
Yeah, you said.
It's like if someone knows about something bad going on and then they tell the public.
That's right. You can be, if you're part of a business, there's a law. You should probably know this law. You might get rich off it someday. If there's a business or something that's costing the government money, and you become a whistleblower, that means you tell on your business. There's a law that says you'll get a certain percentage, I think it's 10%. You'll get 10% of the money that you save the government. And there's been cases of this where, okay, now there's a cost-benefit ratio that supports your decision to get involved and to go against the group. The group is saying, stay quiet, we're getting away with this. We're not having to pay taxes on this, even though we should be. And if you find out about that, you can go against the group because it'll benefit you. There was some lady where this company was costing the government billions. And she actually got hundreds of millions of dollars for being the whistleblower. How cool is that?
Awesome.
You have an ally. Often if one person goes against, it's likely that more people will join because now they see they have someone else going against. So if everybody's saying, no, Mr. Willis, we don't want the test today, we want it tomorrow, and one person goes, well, I want it today. And then another one goes, yeah, I want it today too, because I got this tomorrow. And then all of a sudden, several hands come up. Once you see you have an ally, it's more likely for you to dissent from the group. And you become entrapped. Do y'all remember what entrapment is? We studied that last time. What's entrapment?
You have one action lead to another, or
One action leads to another.
slowly bring them in.
You slowly bring them in. And this can happen when dissenting from a group. Okay? If the whole group is saying this, and then you kind of start to speak up, and then you say, well, I've already said this, I might as well tell the whole thing. You know, you become entrapped. You slowly increase your amount of dissent, and pretty soon you're fully dissented from the group. Oh, this is for next time. Okay. Nope, this is no. Let's just take a look at this chart. This is a chart you should know. 2 or 3 multiple choice questions just on this. Let me explain it to you. Ethnic identity. And when we're talking about groups in social psychology, of course, we're going to talk about ethnic groups. White people, black people, Asians, Jews, Catholics, Muslims. Whatever group you identify with is your ethnic identity. Some people have a strong ethnic identity. They really closely associate with their group. I'm an American. America. Woo! John Mellencamp. Yeah. John Mellencamp has strong ethnic identity with Americans. Weak ethnic identity is you don't really associate very strong. Yeah, you're an American, you know you are, but you're not, wearing the flag around and all that kind of thing. So your ethnic identity can be strong or weak. Now, acculturation is when you're trying to fit in with another group. You ever heard this? I heard it on the radio today, acculturation. Acculturation is trying to fit in. And, no, I didn't. I didn't hear it on the radio. I heard Miss Nevin say it. Did you hear her say acculturation? Talking about her parents, the Italians?
Oh, yeah.
That's what it was. We hear words like this all the time and just ignore them because we don't know what they mean. But acculturation is becoming a member of another group. And Miss Nevins was saying her parents are Italian, and they aren't very well acculturated, meaning they haven't fit into the American style. They still act Italian. They still like to do everything Italian. So if you have strong acculturation, you are trying to really fit in with the new group. If you have weak acculturation, you're not trying to fit in with the new group. So all the time you have, or not all, but with some people you have a mixing of cultures. If you're from America and you move to Spain, then are you going to stay American? Then you would have weak acculturation. Or are you going to try to become Spanish? Then you'd have strong acculturation. And so there's different. If you have strong ethnic identity, that's John Mellencamp, and you have weak acculturation, that means John Mellencamp moves to Italy, but he's going to still act American. We call him a separatist.
Oh dear.
Like in Star Wars.
Or the separate.
Yeah, like in Star Wars.
Or the Pilgrims.
You have strong ethnic identity, like John Mellencamp, but you also have strong acculturation. He's also going to try to be Italian. That's possible. You can try to be both things. We call that bicultural. You have weak ethnic identity. You're American, but you don't really associate it that much. You're not crazy about America. You don't talk about it all the time and such. Weak ethnic identity and strong acculturation, when you move to a new group, you really try to fit in with that group. We call you assimilated.
Like in the Borg.
Right. These are good sci-fi references.
You are welcome.
Weak ethnic identity, you don't really care that much about your group. And weak acculturation, you don't care about fitting into the new group. You're marginal.
Very good.
So this applies to mixing of groups. Isn't that interesting?
Sure.
You get several questions. That's good multiple choice stuff, because look, 1, 2, 3, 4 choices. Multiple choices. Huh? And the way they ask the questions, you've probably noticed it'll say something like, Mary is from Argentina and she's very proud of her country. She then moves to Canada and decides she also wants to fit in with some of the Canadian experience.
Bicultural. Make me.
I will.
Ethnocentrism, that's a word you need to know. Most people, including you probably, exhibit ethnocentrism, the belief that one's own ethnic group or nation or religion is superior to all others. Most people think they live in the best country. If you go ask people from each country what the best country is, they'll usually say theirs. They can't all be right, can they? Are all countries the best country? Maybe in some respects, there's something about each country that's really good, I'm sure. But this is the normal thought, that your ethnic group, your religion, your nation, whatever, is the most superior. We call that ethnocentrism. An interesting experiment was done with some Boy Scouts. It's called the Robbers Cave Experiment. And they talk about it in the reading. It's about groups and how groups get along. And they took a bunch of Boy Scouts and they divided them into two groups. They called one group the Eagles and one group the Rattlers. And what they did is they made the Eagles compete with the Rattlers in a bunch of games. Tug of war, fundraising, who could tie the best knot, whatever Eagle Scouts, or whatever Scouts do.
Build fires.
Build fires, very good. Contests. And you can see very few Eagles who had best friends who were Rattlers, and very few Rattlers had best friends who were Eagles. This shows that less than 10%. And then what they did was they introduced cooperative games, where the Rattlers had to work with the Eagles and work together on a problem. And after these cooperative games were introduced, the percentage of friends in the other group went way up. Percentage of boys who had a best friend in the out group. So now about 35% of Rattlers had Eagle friends, best friends, and about 20-some% of Eagles had Rattlers who were best friends. So this is before cooperative activities, and this is after. This is why they desegregated our schools. Experiments like this show that when you work together, it leads to group harmony. And it's one of the major foundations of our country is trying to get groups together, not keeping them separate. Equal rights for everyone is supposed to be the idea.
Are there the same number of people in the Eagles and Rattlesnakes?
I don't know.
Or are they just one thinks they're friends and the other doesn't?
You're asking why that's higher than that?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
We're best friends.
The Rattlers liked the Eagles, but the Eagles didn't care as much for the Rattlers, it looks like. But, it's probably small groups, and just a few guys either way could really, change the experiment. You can read about it. I'm not exactly